I'd like to introduce Paul Petito. How do you pronounce that? I don't want to mispronounce it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Yeah, my name is Paul Petito. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Land Resources at Maryland DNR. I was Director of the Wildlife Agency for about 21 years before recently transitioning into this role. I have held this role periodically throughout my 30 years at DNR, but so happy to be here and looking forward to engaging.
Thank you for joining us. At this time,
We have John, he's on.
Is John on?
Yep.
We have John Wilson, coordinator, former coordinator with the state Scenic and Wild Rivers. John, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. Glad to hear you.
Yes, I was working for the department for 33 years, and one of my responsibilities was as the state Scenic and Wild Rivers coordinator. So thank you for having me.
We're glad you could join us. I know you've been involved with this ever since, what, 1986, is that correct?
Yes, it was way back when.
Yeah, a lot of water went down the river, right? Anyway, at this time, we have the agenda, and if we have somebody that entertain a motion to accept it as it's written, or any changes that
Are you talking about the minutes or the agenda?
The minutes of previous meeting.
So the one question I do have about the minutes, I don't know, see, are you gonna
Yeah.
the minutes?
Oh, I can probably pull them up.
I did make a mistake, I'm sorry, the agenda, and we need to approve the agenda, and one thing I'd like to do is add to the end of the agenda. We have some old minutes from actually from 1986, things that we need to discuss as far as our board makeup. And I think there's some interesting things, and there's probably things that we want to adopt from that, and we need to talk about that. Do we have a problem with adding that to the end of the meeting? Anybody have a problem?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended with your suggestion of administrative rules
Do you have a second?
as item C for unfinished and new business.
Do you have a second? I'll second it. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's passed. Now for the previous minutes. Molly, you said you had a question.
What, see, are you gonna read the minutes or?
Yes, I can read the minutes. That's a good thing to do. All right, so the local Youghiogheny River Advisory Board public meeting minutes for August 1st, 2023. Members present: Jeff McCauley, Seth Matheny, Molly Rickey, Randy Rodeheaver, Don Siebold, Roger Zabel, and Sierra Wigfield. The meeting was called to order by Don Siebold at 9:02 a.m. Sierra Wigfield read the minutes from the previous meeting. Approval of minutes: Randy Rodeheaver made a motion to approve the minutes, which was seconded by Roger. The motion passed unanimously. Suggestions that the board, and then public comments. Suggestions that the board thoroughly review the 1996 management plan, law, and regulations about the limitations of activities in the wild and scenic corridor. Highlighted that the Yough River's economic impact, resource for fly fishing and use of trails, recommendations for a smaller bridge with bike and pedestrian facilities. There were various concerns raised about tourism, sediment control, improvement of fish habitat, outdoor activities, and the impact on businesses due to the proposed bridge. The bridge violates the wild and scenic regulations, but the bridge should consider a design to conform with the management plan, specifically to the easement needed for a bridge construction. EMS zones do not cross the bridge, so shutting it down would not drastically alter the response time. Unfinished business, Sierra Wigfield discussed the importance to provide bike and pedestrian facilities to the bridge and crossing the parking lot. Don Siebold noted 25-mile-per-hour speed limit and the fact that the bridge is an exception because it is in the corridor before the wild and scenic designation. He also noted that ultimately DNR makes the decision regarding the design of the bridge. The board's intent is to build a bridge, the board's intention is to build a bridge was discussed with emphasis on minimizing its size and impact. Kyle Smith from GPI presented the aesthetic options for the bridge, including steel railings, concrete barriers, and concerns were raised about the maintenance and impact on trees. He added construction can take up to 3 to 6 months. Seth Matheny brought up that constructing during the winter months could mean less impact to runoff since things are frozen and a waiver for MDE could be obtained to construct during that period. On the other side of the coin, construction during the typical season could be drier. The existing bridge was replaced in 2011. There was a discussion about reducing the impacts on farmers and school buses during potential road closures based on when the construction takes place. Bridge recommendations. Molly Rickey made a motion to close the road for construction and keep the alignment in the same for the bridge replacement. A motion was seconded by Roger Zabel and passed unanimously. Randy Rodeheaver made a motion for the bridge to be as narrow as possible, but not greater than 28 feet. The motion was seconded by Roger, and the motion was passed 6-1. Molly Rickey voting no due to concerns about the impact of differences between 24-foot and 28-foot bridge. Seth Matheny suggested to have a 2-foot shoulder, 2 to 10-foot wide lanes for a 6-foot and a 6-foot shoulder for bike and ped access. A motion was made by Seth Matheny to recommend the bridge's railing to be concrete to maximize the durability and reduce potential failures, potential future impacts on repairing the bridge. A motion was seconded by Roger Zabel. A unanimous decision was made to use concrete for the bridge. A motion was made by Seth Matheny to recommend construction begin in May and take place during the following 3 to 6 months. A motion was seconded by Sierra Wigfield, and a motion passed unanimously. Future meetings. Don Siebold discussed the need to have more regular meetings than an as-needed basis. A motion was made by Sierra Wigfield to meet at least once annually and seconded by Randy Rodeheaver and passed unanimously. There was a discussion on who can call a meeting to order when that arises. A motion was made by Sierra Wigfield to allow the county commissioners, chairman, and the DNR to call for the board to meet. And the motion was seconded by Randy Rodeheaver and passed unanimously. Concerns were raised about the designs and aesthetics of the bridge. Carl Smith with GPI noted that he has listened to the public and has a better understanding of why they were dissatisfied when the renderings were presented on July 10th. He will offer better recommendations, like the barrier with gaps to see with the river and to use other molds for concrete to better match the character of the area. Suggestion that current and former DNR managers of the area brief the board on historic and current activities in the corridor, and concerns about limiting public input with only 1 meeting per year. Adjournment on a motion made by Randy Rodeheaver and seconded by Seth Matheny and passed unanimously by the board. The meeting adjourned at 11:11 a.m. Any?
What about suggest under bridge recommendations, the third bullet point be removed, as in we didn't vote on that, it was just an individual comment.
Okay, I'll take that out. The first one? Or second one.
Suggested to have a 2-foot shoulder, 2 10-foot wide lanes, and a 6-foot shoulder for bike and pedestrians.
All right, it's off.
Any other items? That's correct. Yeah, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, at this time, we'll allow for, public comment. We'd like to, hold that comment to a minimum or maximum of 5 minutes. So if anybody would like to speak, now's the time.
We have a sign-up sheet, Dawn.
We have Steve Stewart signed up.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first off, I'd like to thank and applaud the board for taking the privilege that you are given by legislation to convene yourselves. I know that the county didn't request this. I know that the Secretary of DNR didn't request this time. The purpose of this meeting was listed as concerns about public involvement in the management of the Youghiogheny. I've raised a lot of issues that I'm sure most people label me as a complainer. But I did choose to live here, I choose to purchase property here because of the wild yak, because of the protections of the wild yak that I understood. I've had a copy of the management plan since 1997. I've engaged and I've been in this river for 4 years. Couple of concerns related to public involvement. Our friend Paul Durham, who managed the yacht quite a while and interacted with this group for a number of years. Noteworthy not here is the current manager, who also has a role to coordinate this board. Paul talks about a 3-legged stool. And the 3 legs are the law that enables the actual protections of the river. The policy, which is the management plan, and then the thing that enables the management plan, which is the regulations. Trying to understand the regulations of COMAR, but what I understand is the law actually enables DNR to self-regulate. They actually create the COMAR regulations that then are what guides the management plan, which is what you all are asked to help enact. A couple of things on that. COMAR over the years has been changed 2 subtle times, but not so subtle because they have very long-standing implications. In getting ready for this meeting, I read through the management plan, and normally I go to COMAR to find out what the regulations are. This time I went to the bottom of the management plan. You all hopefully have a copy of it. And in the exception section, which is something I've been raising, the bridge is an exception, the new gauge station is an exception. There's a procedure talks in the management plan about that. Well, in the management plan, I found in section 08-150303, which is about exceptions, section A, it says a person may apply to the department for an exception to these regulations. That's what it says today. But the next phrase is what DNR has removed. And I don't know when they removed it. Upon receipt of any request for an exception, the department immediately shall make available a copy of the request to the Youghiogheny River Local Advisory Board for review and recommendation to the department. This is before something is built, not like this gauge station, not after the fact that you guys have to convene yourselves to talk about it. When they get an application, a proposal, you guys are supposed to get a copy immediately. You were, but conveniently DNR removed that from COMAR regulations. And trying to understand the COMAR regs and how they work is under the management plan, they should have brought that to you guys to discuss, but they didn't. I went back through all the minutes, it's never in here. The only thing they're required to do is to put it in the Maryland Register. And then somehow, the sort of the insider's, thing here is we're supposed to know to look there to find every little tiny nook and cranny that can change this. The other change, which is significant as well, was done in 2010, I was able to track this one down, was also to this exception section,
1 minute, 1 minute.
was
30
that
seconds.
anything that DNR decided, and DNR says that they have full discretion, they can or can't, they can ignore what you say as they did last time with your recommendation on the bridge. They can ignore all the comments that were made at the July 10th meeting, which they did, obviously. is they added a section that says none of that can be challenged in court. DNR added those things. And now they're saying, and they're putting a motion to dismiss my challenge to it based on their regulations that they put in place, not on law, not on legislation, but on COMAR regulations. So something is wrong with this process. I had a minute left. A couple other things I will note in the management plan. Page 39, the authority will be exercised in a manner that allows a significant level of public involvement in decision-making process. Okay? This group of individuals, you, will provide a major element of public involvement in future decisions affecting the river. Okay? The Yacht Advisory Board and citizens, county, state, local towns, will consider any proposed actions. And this will be a major element of the cooperative management approach to the river. All of these things, the intent was that the public would be heavily involved, and you guys would be heavily involved in cooperatively managing this resource. I don't think we're there, and I know John Wilson has a long history. Hopefully he can enlighten us on some of that, and Paul Pedito can share what the current thinking is, because this latest gauge station had a proposal. It had an application. It did not involve any public input. Even if you didn't go by the management plan and just went through the project review process of DNR, it requires at the proposal level to be public involvement. So, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Do we have any other people who would like to comment? We don't have anybody else signed up.
Well, Don, did you want me to comment at this time or?
Yeah, that would be fine, John.
Okay. Well, I want to say that, you know, in my role as Rivers Coordinator, I spent about a third of my career working on the Youghiogheny, but I also worked on rivers throughout the state. And I don't think I have to tell this board that, you know, the Youghiogheny is a special place and is irreplaceable. I mean, it's the only wild river designated in the state. And I guess I'm a little perplexed why DNR, who is essentially the temporary stewards of this spectacular natural resource, appear to be ignoring all of the protection measures that we worked so hard to put in place, such as the Act, the Wild River Regulations, and the management plan. I also have to echo the fact that I think DNR has failed to be open and transparent with this whole decision-making process with the public and this board. Just in the interest of time, one example of ignoring the wild river regs in my mind rests with the granting of the exemption to the county. When you look at the wild river regs, what you see is the exception has to be consistent with the act and not injurious to the wild character of the river. And ironically, when you look at the PIA request and the information, what you see is the DNR resource professionals clearly indicated that it will impact the river and the adjoining corridor, particularly by clearing 2 acres of virgin hemlock forest. And also that the other criteria is that it would not cause an unnecessary hardship by using the existing right-of-way. Once again, DNR resource staff recommended using the existing right-of-way, as did this board, but departmental leadership chose for some reason to grant the exception anyway. I think it's unfortunate that, you know, DNR hasn't been totally forthright in providing information, and the public had to request information regarding the decision-making process through a public information request, and that meetings have, had to be requested. But I think as we've been able to review more information on the whole decision-making process, it clearly reveals the department leadership is not interested in following the regs and protecting the Yough. It almost feels like the foxes are guarding the hen house, if you will. And I think a lot of folks are saying that we're not requesting no bridge or replacing the bridge, but what we're saying is be responsible stewards and use the existing right-of-way, which is a science-based decision.
Thank you very much for your comments. That leads right into our topic number 6, unfinished new business, and talking about the Swallow Falls Bridge project. I, for one, this board is made up of pretty good, well, a very good cross-section of our county. And, we go a lot on feelings here. I know we have to back it up with regs and what have you, but it's like our county is totally ignoring the fact that there is a wild river. And I think that's quite unique, that we have that. And it is something that I think is very beneficial to the county. And when this board, made up of various people who had their own interests and biases, everyone agreed that the bridge should be replaced. There was no dissension at all about that. But the board also made a motion and passed unanimously that the same right of way and that the bridge should be, remain where it's at. And I drove by there this morning coming to this meeting and was just looking over the area that would be cleared out. And, when people come to Garrett County and they want to go to Swallow Falls, I think it's going to change the character of just entering the park. It's just unthinkable to me that we would destroy that. I know these concerns, there's safety concerns. I think they could be addressed. There's one farmer involved. I'm sure that, for the money that's being spent, that things could be done to assist him. I know we have one county commissioner that's on board with totally against using the same approach, and he stated in the July meeting that we needed to have a second bridge and do that particular entrance to cross the river and put a new bridge and abandon the old. I just think it's going to change the character a lot. And they talk about reforestation. The best reforestation I know of is don't do it. Don't tear it down. You don't have to grow it back. And it will not be back, and not in 30 years. It won't be back in 100 years. It'll never happen again. So I think it's very important. Again, this is personal feelings. I'm a property owner along the river. I have zone 1, supposed to be most protected. I'm concerned. I feel like the management plan is put in effect to actually save the river from property owners who were in the process of developing. And it was that reason. Now it looks like we got to be aware and concerned about the state and the county. They want to develop this area and you know, to bring in monies to the coffers of the county. You know, it's like the roles are reversed. And, so, you know, I have big concerns. You know, not one person on this board suggested that we take, and not follow the original right away, replace the bridge. So, and everybody on the board, I think most of the people in the county, it will become split. That was put out before the county, as to, the county as a whole would definitely support the bridge. There would be some controversy, of whether we have a new approach, clear the forest. I'm sure that would be a topic, but that's where the management plan, and our regulations should step in and do what's right for our future population in the town and for people who want to come to get it down. I think it's kind of like the goose that laid the golden egg. We don't want to kill the goose. So that's feelings. That's the way I feel. So, hope that makes some sense. I'd be glad to hear anything else that anybody have to say. I just find it hard. I feel like the county and the state is not acknowledging that we do have river regulations, wild river regulations, and we should be going by that.
Mike, I do have a question for Mr. Petito, if you could explain or, why our opinion as the advisory board was ignored with the Swallow Falls Bridge replacement. And we're all just kind of wondering it's not a collaborative project, it's more of a decision we're not really involved in.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I think that was a question for me, but it was difficult to hear.
Yeah, I was just asking if you could kind of explain why our recommendations weren't considered with the Swallow Falls Bridge replacement, where we kind of stand as an advisory board according to the DNR.
Yeah, I would love to dig deep into this. Regrettably, we are in active litigation, as some of you probably know. And as one of the attorneys in the room and as an attorney, as we've been advised by the Office of the Attorney General, as is always the case, when we're in active litigation, we can't adjudicate that here. I can tell you, so I'll offer a couple thoughts. In an attempt to not sort of color outside those sideboards, that we most certainly considered the input from the advisory board. I think all of you can acknowledge that that was sort of a late arrival to the process, right? There was many decades without input from the advisory board. We're glad that it's been re-upped, for lack of a better phrase. And we're happy to engage on that. We 100% considered the input from all of you. And as I've been quoted and I guess criticized for, we struck a balance. We have very, very strong input from the county as to the necessity of creating the exception and the path that we're on now. And we have to strike that balance between the county's requests and needs and the resource needs. And I think that's where we landed. I think we're confident that we are, to your comments, Mr. Chairman, I think there's a lot of strong feelings here. As somebody who spent weeks on that site during Superstorm Sandy in an attempt to save hemlocks that were already in jeopardy. You know, I didn't sign up to do this as a career for 3 decades to, as was just suggested, you know, to simply ignore the resource and the science here. You don't do what we do for a living without taking very seriously your role and responsibility in making decisions like this. And I think that's where we landed. Again, as someone who's inclined to engage in a Socratic dialogue, I would love to do that here. But you know, that's what happens when you sue us. You kind of put us in a box to talk about it. And you know, that is what it is. We'll adjudicate that at some point before the Garrett County courts, and we'll see where we land there. I think I'll offer this, that you know, the one thing you have to recognize is that the bridge isn't built yet. So we're not dealing with something that is you know, that has to be torn down. We're not having to sort of play back the tape here. I think it's also important to recognize that the request from the county and the input from the key stakeholders on behalf of the county pivoted to a design plan that wasn't previously in the mix. And for anyone to say they know what's going to happen here, that's not factual, because none of us know, because we're waiting on a new design plan based on the input that occurred during that process. So when we get to the 60% design phase, we will have a substantially better understanding of what will happen should it move forward in that design phase status. And the department's in that same posture. No one has those plans, period. So we will take a hard look at those at the time, and we will for sure lean into our promise to mitigate any impacts born of that. I do think it's regrettable, and I have an immense respect for a number of the folks who've retired from the department, whose names have been referenced or testimony was given here today, who worked really hard through all of their years of service. But I'm sure if they were in the same chair I was in, they would find it difficult to believe that we are the fox guarding the hen house, or that we're intentionally ignoring this. I've worked for 5 governors, served 7 secretaries, and I'm pretty confident in saying that none are more leaning into science and fact than this one. I'll stop there.
Well, you say the bridge is not built yet, but the plans are, and I assume you're heading towards building the bridge, a second bridge, deforesting the area and abandoning the old site. Is that the plan?
We issued an exception letter, Mr. Chairman, that would allow for the offset build. Again, at the request of the county and the county's principal leadership at the time, and we are awaiting the 60% design status of those plans, because that is what will inform the group. There's a larger group of individuals in order to know what happens next. Without that version of the plans, we're all just guessing as to what the impacts are here.
So there's really no chance in having the original alignment. Yeah, we're headed towards
Right.
new alignment. Is that right?
That is not what I said. I'm quite certain that let's put it this way, you can't, I mean, I don't think that's the answer. I think there's always a chance if the county were to come back and say, we're okay with closing this bridge for 3 to 12 months, however long the build's gonna take, then our exception letter is no longer necessary.
You're saying that our concerns should be directed towards the county commissioners who submitted the request.
No, what I'm saying is that it was a shared responsibility, because we are the stewards of the river. And that we gave strong consideration notwithstanding the resource concerns, we give strong consideration to the social cultural impacts that were raised during and I'll pause here and just say, there was a suggestion made that there's been no sort of public process. We had at least 2 public hearings on this, and held open the opportunity for folks to comment. The PIA was only necessary because we were in active litigation. Folks sitting in that room can tell you, I picked up the phone and spoke to them at length, only to have those conversations used to inform the litigation and the complaint that was filed. So, I'm a strong believer that, processes aren't complete until the final answer has been issued, and no final answer has been issued here.
Well, the way it's headed, the final answer is not going to be very satisfactory to probably the majority of this board, because we are talking about deforestation, the area where the new line will be. I guess, as far as the July meeting and the lack of involvement by the board, the board was set up, it was there, and during the time that the management plan was developed, DNR kept the board, and they kept them notified of everything that went on in the yacht corridor, and everything was brought to it. The fact that the management plan was approved in '96, we were kind of disbanded. We were disbanded. We were given to the county. Nobody, nothing says that we couldn't have been updated. We were not updated. And the July meeting came much after the fact that many decisions have been made. So, I don't feel that's quite fair.
And I would also just like to add that the very day in July that we met, Secretary Kurtz was at the Discovery Center with Commissioner Paul Edwards. So we were all available on that day to meet together about something like this. It kind of feels like we have been purposefully excluded with this process.
If I could respond to that, because again, I've served 7 different secretaries. I can assure you nothing here is intentional. I think you all just said it, right? This was a group that didn't exist for almost 3 decades. I don't think the department can be held responsible for sort of anticipating the rising up of this organization. I'm more than happy for us to engage going forward. Again, we're huge fans of public process. More input makes for a better decision and a better product. But this was, this was a bit of a curveball, and no one sat back. I can guarantee you, no one sat back and said, "Oh, they're back. I hope, I wish they weren't." That is absolutely not true.
But, I'd like to say something to that effect, and I might be jumping ahead of the agenda somewhat. Given that we were ignored on the trail initially, and we hadn't met in 30 years, I understand that. And then our input on the bridge was ignored. And I understand that we're an advisory board and our decisions don't stand. But wouldn't you let us know that you're gonna put a gauging station on the yacht after the fact, after all this came up? Really surprises me, and almost is a slap in the face, in my opinion.
Yeah, again, we have multiple gauging stations on the river. We've got multiple rivers, as Mr. Wilson said. We have a lot of rivers. We have other advisory bodies. There was no intentional sort of ignoring of this body. This is a process that has occurred in the past, and I can tell you there is an OAG memo out there that suggests that the board was originally stood up to develop the regulations. And I think it's a question for you all going forward as to whether, whether the collective sort of legal entities see the role as continuing. Again, I'm fine with that, but very plainly, we did not ignore or intentionally avoid giving you a heads up about a gauging station, because we considered that somewhat perfunctory and a thing that occurs for the purpose of gathering science. Again, not our project. This was something that came to us from the county, from the POA and from the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation. I'm sure any of those entities with all their members, some of which you are, I'm guessing, members of, they might have thought of it as a big deal, for lack of a better phrase, and even they didn't put it out in their communications because they saw it as something that was somewhat routine.
The fact that the gauging station was installed, it's kind of strange. The same run, they do this type of work, and they do it from the bridge. I wonder why it couldn't have been done from the bridge at Swallow Falls. And and it is a sightly thing, and that is probably the major concern, is that the fact that it was just done, and not many people is going to see that, but I guarantee you, where I live, I couldn't do anything like that. And again, this doesn't seem like it's necessary to do it, just hundreds of yards from where the bridge is located. Well,
But I respect that, Mr. Chairman. I can assure you, the scientists at the United States Geological Services Division, they use the science that guides them in determining where they would get the best information from that gauging station's placement. At no time did they sit down and say, well, this is a spot that's going to upset people. It was clearly based and only based on where they were going to get the best data to help inform the county, the POA, and the Watershed Foundation and their goals, and helping us better manage the corridor, the watershed, and the lake. And I'm pretty confident that thousands of stakeholders on the lake will be happy with the data that comes from that, in helping manage the relationship there with Brookfield. Something that hasn't been mentioned at all, and a group of stakeholders who, haven't engaged in this at all. But should they know we moved it to a place that doesn't help inform it and doesn't provide sound science, I suspect they would have difficulty with moving it to a different location. This is all about science from a group of people who only do this for a living.
It seems a bit ironic that the litigious case that you mentioned is the exact individual property that the gauge station was erected on. Like from
Again, all respect, I'm sure we could connect a lot of dots here and come up with a theory that says we did something intentional to upset people. That is absolutely not the case. The record is crystal clear. The USGS looked very hard at the different flow rates, the type of topography they needed, to avoid placing this in an area that would have upset a different group of people and produced meaningless results.
so we think that the results where the gauging station is now would be far different from, say, taking the information from the bridge.
So my training is in wildlife biology, wildlife science, and the law, Mr. Chairman. I'm not a water flow geology expert, but having read the record, they made it very clear to me that if they moved it to certain other areas, that ultimately the flows there and the change in terrain, topography, would impugn the data such that it wouldn't be as meaningful.
So the fact that the cables are strung across the river, is that something that has to stay? Can they, is it if they need to take collect the data there, do they have to keep those cables across the river?
So the project is, this is a temporary project as it was permitted. I think the maximum as it was requested was 3 years. As it relates to the placement of the cables initially, we have to rely on them to say, this is the only way we can do this to get reliable, consistent data. And I think that, you know, sort of intuitively makes sense, right? If you put it on either side of the river, your flows change. They needed a flat, consistent, sort of lacking in changes in flow without other impacts. So here they'll be able to measure flow pretty consistently. And to do that, you do it from, you know, sort of center channel. And look, I spent most of my adult life on and off that river. My kids have been there since they were 2 years old, so I get it. It's suboptimal in terms of aesthetics. But we have devices like this all over Maryland, whether it's in the main channel of the Chesapeake Bay or her tributaries. And you know, sometimes until the technology evolves, this is the best we can do to get the best data available for this type of project.
Well, there already are multiple gauge stations. That was one question I had from a community member, is what is the all of a sudden need for this new gauge station that is across the wild and scenic corridor? I'll remind you that it's a very small portion of the river that's wild and scenic, and you chose to go straight through the middle of that without any like
We never got to, we weren't privileged to know why it needed to be there. That's for
it
sure.
was paid for, as far as I understand.
So again, I was kind of caution on the pronouns. We didn't do anything here. We were asked by the experts, by a project that's underwritten by many friends of yours in the Watershed Foundation and others, to work with USGS's scientific experts. And this is where they said was the optimal location. Again, to avoid putting this in a location that doesn't produce meaningful results. I hope we can all agree that putting something like this in that corridor and getting suboptimal or ultimately meaningless results would have been really the most irresponsible decision.
Well, I have a question about, and it goes with Molly, that there's a gauge 6 miles upstream from that at Oakland. There's also a gauge 1.5 miles downstream of that at Boys Run. And this one gauge in the middle of the top yacht, Swallow Falls section, seems to be a real waste of money and time and in the corridor. I mean, you're collecting data upstream of where Muddy Creek flows into the Yough, so you're missing a good portion of the tributaries that flow. They collect all of that same data at Boys, or it's now called near McHenry, but it's again 1.5 miles downstream of this gauge that was just put in. So it seems like there's something fishy going on where the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation is trying to monitor water in the Yough that doesn't really affect Deep Creek Lake at all. And to me, as a whitewater user, it really seems like they're trying to figure out a way to reduce the number of whitewater releases that come out of Deep Creek Lake. And so by putting this gauge in, not giving any kind of public process that this was going to happen to get input, just seems very fishy. Doesn't seem like it was totally necessary and a waste of time and money. Now, if I understood right, you said this gauge is only going to be in place for about 3 years.
It was permitted as a temporary structure. And I guess at this point, I'm going to be crystal clear. If the goal is to adjudicate sort of the why this station and what is the actual motivation of the parties, you know, I think you're going to have USGS sit in front of you and explain what I believe is to be the, you know, legitimate and sound science and seeking this location on behalf of, you know, the county, the Watershed Foundation, and the POA. I can't speak to there's nothing in front of me that says there's, you know, anything fishy here. I have to trust these these scientists that, their motivation is to collect good data.
I have a question. The location was decided by USGS experts without any input from the POA or the Watershed Foundation. Is that correct?
Yeah, ultimately USGS is the one that decided this is the spot we need to place this in order to get data. Period. To get the data that they desired. There's nothing in the application that says, so we can monitor, for future whitewater releases or any of that.
Did their application say specifically why that area would provide better data than a different location?
The application and or the dialogue that we had. So as I said earlier, they stood up a number of answers to our questions consistent with yours, which is, well, why can't we use the existing ones? Why can't it be placed at a different location? And the short version of that, sort of paraphrasing, is this spot optimizes the collection of the data for their purposes, that avoids having the data impugned or sort of polluted by the changes in topography that occur at some of the other locations. I have to trust that at the end of the day, they looked at the data that is being gathered elsewhere and said, this is not the information that you need. POA, Watershed Foundation in Garrett County.
I guess I just don't understand what topography would change in the water quality. One thing, and that might be a question for USGS.
Yeah, again, I'm trying to be helpful. I'm trying to be transparent and forthright, but I'm way outside the scope of my area of expertise. I'm relating what we have in the way of the informed decision-making process.
And Paul, going back to my earlier point, if we would have been involved in this from the start, we wouldn't be jamming you with all these questions.
Well, you might still not like the answer, and I respect that, but at the end of the day, I guess in our defense, and everyone that's come before me who hasn't gone through this process, we had 27 years where a whole bunch, and I can't tell you how many, but literally hundreds of permits and decisions have been made in that watershed where we weren't asked to engage with the board. It's not a hard decision for me to say, look, we'll do this going forward, but I think it's reasonable for us to be in a posture of saying, well, we've never done this for almost 3 decades. So to sort of know that was an expectation today, I think we do get a little bit of deference in that context.
And I think also it has to do with the lack of communication between the county commissioners and us as well. I did email them inquiring about the funding, and apparently the county is paying for the 3 years for the maintenance of the gauge station. So that was something that was kind of like surprising to me that we didn't.
So can I ask a question? I'm sorry. Who is responsible for administering the management plan of the river? Because the comment you just made about not engaging with us, you're not required to engage with this board. It's actually written in the management plan. When I talked to Roy Musselwhite, what he uses to manage the Youghiogheny Wild River NDA, he said, I use the management plan. It's in the management plan that you're supposed to come to this board to discuss these types of things. So I don't understand how you say it's not your responsibility to not come to this board when it is your management plan that says it's your responsibility to do that.
So I can't see who's speaking, but I got a feeling it is the complainant in our active litigation. I will correct the record, though, that I did not say it is not our responsibility to engage the board. I said, I think given the fact the board didn't exist for 27 years, that folks, reasonable people could say, we couldn't have anticipated your interest in this gauging station project. We get it now. We're happy to engage going forward. But you can't put me on the record as saying I said that it's not our responsibility to engage with the board.
The fact that we weren't involved for 27 years was because we were not notified of anything that's been on. So, you know, we were pretty much kept in the dark because previously, during the formulation of the management plan, and we were informed, we were kept informed. Then after that, we got nothing.
Well, that's not entirely true either, though. The board was very involved when they did the Kendall Trail in the early 2000s. We actually went out and walked the trail with DNR, made recommendations as to what we wanted it all to be like, and they took a lot of that into consideration. I have one other question about not only with this gauge that's at Swallow Falls now, I've also heard through the grapevine that there's another one being planned for Muddy Creek that flows into the Oxford below Swallow Falls, which would also be in the Sinswa corridor. And if that's the case, is there any word from DNR that you've gotten applications or requests to put in a second gauge?
I'm not aware of any. That doesn't mean that, you know, they don't exist somewhere else in our process. Again, what I would offer is that if it's the body's desire that, you know, you are given the opportunity to review and, again, consistent with the way it's worded now, offer advice or recommendations. You know, I don't anticipate us pushing back on that. I will say, and I have about 25 other advisory groups that are part of our processes in the various land use units. Most of those meet monthly to ensure that, to the extent that their involvement is important to the process, that we don't hold up applicants who are waiting for sort of all the parties to participate. So just trying to scale your future sort of workload, should we land in a place where we are reviewing all of these potential requests.
So whenever you get a request, Paul, does the county, are they notified of these requests?
No, not every request triggers notification to the county. Because these can vary from, I don't know, I can't give you good examples, but there's certainly examples of projects where, you know, the county doesn't necessarily have a stake in it. We do acquisitions, for example, in anywhere in the county. We for sure alert the county commissioners and the other local electeds. Because that's a big, you know, sort of a substantial change in the landscape, if you will.
Any other input? What we talk about here? On the Wilson Bridge. But actually the gating station. I think it's under topic 7, discussing and on establishing a protocol for receiving updates from the county DNR. I don't know how to go about proceeding here, but we obviously are lacking. So, how can we address this?
Protocol 496.
Before 96, we didn't really have a protocol because it was automatic. You know, everything came before us. I don't know of anything that's not. Roger would know. I think we were updated we met on a monthly basis. That's true. We did. Yeah, we kept up to date. That's something that just dropped off after the management plan was approved.
We find in the county and the DNR that we're an active group and we can go back to getting, and involved in the process.
So
Anything that this board specifically needs to do, or is it outside of this board's control?
So are you saying we should formally request to be updated by DNR and
We
the county?
I think we should, as long as there's current projects happening in the quarter, we should meet monthly to discuss those and be updated by the Garrett County government as well. That way they have the opportunity each month to notify us of
So
any pertinent information.
is there a motion to do this? Do you know, to send a letter to the DNR and county to be updated
Monthly
monthly?
with, I'll make a motion to request, notification on a monthly basis of the active projects in the Wild Sea corridor.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
Is there any other organizations outside of the county or the DNR that would be able to either apply or,
Well,
well, appropriations are in our projects?
The water appropriations.
And I think we need to make sure that all agencies are aware.
well, you know, if they do anything inside the corridor, they should be notifying DNR. I mean, they can't do things in the border. That's, I feel the problem, the county, they just ignored us completely. They ignored the management plan. Basically, that's what's happened. So,
We want to make sure that the county and the DNR covers all the bases.
right. Exactly. So,
I think you're saying like if there's a roads department request, that would have to go through one of those agencies, so
we should be notified. I mean, the fact that the bridge was out there for a long time, the board was never notified. And that was because I think they assumed that.
well, I'll just say the public really has no idea about this as well. But everyone I've talked to has no idea that this is even a project, so it's true public knowledge. Like, no one's trying to like
Oh,
provide information
to us.
to the public
The public
in general.
outreach. Yeah, well, if they provide it to us, it would have an opportunity to go before the public, right? Isn't that correct?
Yes.
So can we restate the motion then? The motion is to notify DNR and the county that we would like to be notified of any activity in the court. Wild, scenic, mainly wild. Wild, scenic, open. Yeah. We are part of those. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
So, all those in favor? Randy? Yeah, I see you waved your hand. Okay, so that's, that should cover that topic. At this time, I'd like to maybe see Eric to help me here.
Sure.
I have a whenever the 1986 board was formed, we had some adoption of protocol that we undertake. We think they're pretty complete. And maybe we could add to our own. Everybody should have a copy of that. Basically the minutes from the board meeting shall record all transactions by the board and all activities taken. As a minimum, they shall include the name of the board, date, place, and time of the meetings, whether it's a regular or special emergency meeting, identify the presiding chairman and the secretary of the meeting for all members in attendance, whether the minutes of the previous meetings were read and approved. Previously, top of this, all meetings will be called to order by the chairman. In the absence of the chairman, and in the event the chairman has not designated a board member to act in his behalf during his absence, a temporary chairman shall be elected by plurality by the members of attendance at such meeting. A quorum for any meeting of the board shall consist of chairman or temporary chairman, a simple majority of the members of the board. That's different from what we have now. I think we say 6. So, Section 3, obviously, it's pretty much the same. All motions will be either adopted or lost. So the names of the members making the motion, whether each motion was unanimously adopted. If a split vote occurs, the number of votes for and against shall be recorded. Points of order and appeals, whether sustained or lost. Summarize reports on technical and administrative agenda topics covered. Presentations by guests and other invitees. Agenda topics for the next board meeting. The time of adjournment. Our previous bylaws. Do you want to incorporate any of this information into our current bylaws?
I guess in terms of like official bylaws, I don't have anything besides what was written in that first meeting minutes.
Say what now?
There are no, I haven't found any like documents that say, you know, local Youghiogheny advisory board bylaws beyond the procedural, the administrative procedures found in like the first meeting minutes from 1997. I sent those along. And they're also on the county's website with the other minutes that I was able to scan. There's like 7 or 8 points. Let me pull it up. But I am all for adopting some sort of bylaws or procedures for this board to follow.
I'll make a motion to adopt bylaws.
Previous.
And utilize, I guess the one thing that this doesn't have in it that was in those 1997 ones, which I'm trying to pull up, was the, there were like public comments and also like how many times a year we are supposed to meet. They had, I think, at least 2, one in May and one in November, and then another point about public comments. They'd have 10 minutes of public comments before, like in the beginning of the meeting, 10 minutes of public comments after, like the board had discussions, and then the meetings would not last more than 2 hours, which I kind of liked having the hard time limit on that, just because there's only so much attention that you can have.
If we meet, we can decide to meet on a regular basis monthly. That's not a problem thing. I think we had in the past you stated that, we were gonna meet bi-yearly.
I think our last minutes, we just, well, in that first meeting, they said, the board will meet not less than 2 times per year on the second Thursday of the month, May, November, at Garrett Community College. If the board is evaluating specific issues and additional meetings are required, then they'll meet monthly on the second Thursday.
Maybe we could do a better job of putting this together.
I think this would be worth like drafting and then putting out for the public to see before we vote on anything.
And I would be curious to see the DNR and the county's response if they're gonna let us know this stuff, because we don't know about it. There's no use to me.
In terms of being notified, I guess I have some concerns in terms of, because the mapping for the corridor is so poor, like it's really hard to know. Like I suppose what we could do is like kind of put a buffer on like what we think is the corridor, and we might look at projects that are in or out. But in terms of defining on what zone exactly projects are in, I think that right now, like, I don't know, I have concerns about the mapping issues and bringing projects forward to the board. In order for us to make a good decision and follow those regulations, you kind of need to know if it's in zone 1, 2, or 3.
Okay, so if it's not in the corridor, say it's outside the corridor, but it's affecting the decisions, like the whole bike path on the bridge, like seems to come out of nowhere, there's not bike lanes leading to the bike, to the bridge. So like there's something going on that's creating this request. So even though it's not in the corridor, it is affecting it.
Sure. But yeah,
Well, I think we need to discuss it more.
I will put a draft together, combining like what you provided, Dawn, from 1986, and also what was established in 1997. And then I think then we can have some discussion on it at our next meeting. Does that sound good?
To motion to have to take this to the next meeting.
Should we be discussing the hard boundaries at the next meeting? If we don't know what projects are in or out, you know, that's well.
Okay. Well, I'm talking about our, I think we got 2 different things that kind of mixed together.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We need to have administrative rules here to operate the board.
And
I think that's what we need to kind of get so, and maybe address it the next meeting.
I make a motion to draft and publish suggested administrative rules and bylaws before the next meeting, and then we'll discuss them.
So, the previous motion was on the floor.
Oh,
I think we should, it basically has failed, right? I mean, we haven't voted on it. Right. Okay.
Well, second.
Okay, those, any other discussion? If none, all those in favor? Now, the next meeting, Seth, what was your concern?
Do we get a vote on hard boundaries that are, what is it that the law is important that we have the boards that find it open?
Hard boundaries?
Yeah.
I'm confused with that. John, are you still out there?
Yes,
Okay, the question was hard boundaries, you know, I think that's pretty well laid out, although,
what's the question, Don? Can you speak up?
the hard, I think Seth was asking, you know, the board should, comment or input on, things that happen within the border of the, corridor, which the corridor is pretty much already designed and is out there. It's just that the maps are not the best as far as the way they're keyed, laid out, what's zone 1, what's zone 2, what's zone 3, that sort of thing. I mean, I think the corridor is defined. And then we just need to know if something is going on inside that corridor.
Making sure that the county, the DNR, and this board all agree what the border is for projects that are decided, if we need to be aware.
I know in terms of the county's GIS mapping, we have a boundary, but every time it's on a map, we put a big old like star on it saying like, this is representational only. Granted, our property boundaries, I feel, have that same level of confidence, like they're not a survey, but they get you close in terms of where you are. I wouldn't count on that. I wouldn't take the parcels or the maps of the property lines to court or anything, because I would trust a surveyor or a plat way more than I would trust them. But in terms of just providing information on like who you should involve or notify, they're helpful for that.
Well, anytime the DNR receives a request, I would think they would be aware of whether it's in the corridor or not.
Part of the application, according to the regulations, you're supposed to like locate where on the map the project is whenever you submit this application to DNR. So perhaps they would have a good way to provide us that information, but in terms of like the county informing this board, because I would like to do our due diligence. I'm just I don't know, the level of confidence that like, we would be deciding on projects that might be in, might be out. I'm concerned about that.
I mean,
I'm not disagreeing. Like, I think there should be a buffer just because our property boundaries are so fuzzy.
what I can add to this somewhat is, yeah, I think DNR, some of the staff that I've been in communication with, have indicated that they know full well that the existing mapping is not that accurate. And I got the sense that they were hoping to improve the mapping of the corridor, using GIS. I don't know if they've started that process, where they are in the process, but anyway.
So I'll offer two thoughts, and I apologize. I was supposed to be in at 10 o'clock. I'm trying to push through this, but I may have to jump. So two answers. One, and I think Sarah said this, these come to us with a reference that it's in the corridor, and we make the call, and most people don't get it wrong, that they because most of these are from organizations that have some science element tied to them, so they know that they're in. So I think the simple answer is if we continue down this path, if we get an application that we believe is in the corridor and you want to be notified of it, then you can expect us to be alerted to those applications and share them. As it relates to updating the mapping, that is our goal. We were hoping to use the funding that was originally intended for the trail, and that, as you all may know, that money was sort of redacted after the fact. So we had hoped not to build the trail, but to at least map the corridor using modern day digitized data with some of those funds, and that money doesn't exist anymore. So we're looking at a couple options, including engaging some of the academic institutions across the region who do this as part of their academic model. So it's on our radar. We're working on it.
And then we can, you already stated that you pretty well know that it's in the corridor or not. So if it comes to that situation, then we should get notified.
Well, that, or like, even if like the permits department, we get a a deck permit or something on one of these structures. Like I said, it would be kind of fuzzy, but I would imagine they would also have to file a permit with DNR if they'd want to, no, not for residential. They're in the regulations, it's very clear, so I'd have to, my book with the regulations, blue one in front, it's in the back. So,
John, pretty much, I mean, the corridor is pretty much, marked physically. I mean, if there's a project comes up, would be fairly obvious to figure out whether it's in the corridor or not. Wouldn't you say? John Wilson?
What's that now?
I say, the way it is now, the corridor, there is markings that define the corridor, although, they're vague, but if something's going on, I think it would be pretty obvious to know that it's in the corridor and the advisory board should get notification. But doesn't that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know, as you well know, I mean, the corridor's over 4,000 acres and, now the state's acquired over 4,000 acres. They haven't acquired all the property. Obviously, your property hasn't been acquired, but so I think there's a good sense of where the corridor is. And so I think over the years, there has been some surveying of the corridor done when an adjoining property owner has, sold a property or proposed something and they didn't know whether or not, they were going to impact the corridor. So I think the bottom line is, I think there's a good sense, of what's in and what's out. Obviously, if DNR, gets the funding to upgrade the mapping, it would, given, the current, GIS systems, it'd be extremely accurate.
thank you, Secretary, Assistant Secretary, for providing updates on the mapping. So looking forward to future updates on that. So, and
Yeah, answer.
do we want to discuss meeting date and some topics for discussion for the next agenda?
Yeah, we can set a date. I know everybody had a time that they could join the meeting. I'm pretty flexible. When you do. So, does anybody here want to make some suggestions as to how soon should we meet at the beginning of the month, end of the month? I would think this time of year we probably not want to meet right at the beginning.
Mondays, I can tell you that.
Mondays are not good.
Monday mornings.
Okay. Anybody have any other things that we try to work around?
I mean, it was suggested for that Thursday, I think, in the 1997 minutes. What about I'd like enough time to, be able to take a look at those bylaws and get them out and give people a chance to be notified. Do you want to try like January 25th? That's currently open on my calendar. And also, do you like this venue? Do you want to try the college or any other venue? It's all, that's I'm going to leave that up to the board too.
In the mornings or.
And
Evenings are busy.
Morning to business.
The evenings, like with the kids' travels.
Roger, do you have it? Mornings are best.
Morning's fine.
Mornings are good.
Okay, so do I,
Randy? Can you hear us, Randy? I see.
I'm pretty flexible. I just have to do it by Zoom.
Yes.
Well, we can provide that option. We'll do our best.
If we do it by Zoom, does it need to be here or can?
I'm sure we can make arrangements wherever we go. The college has like Zoom capabilities. I'm sure they would be able to host us, or we could do it here.
Yes. Well, we need to have capability of that where, because not everybody would have.
Now, I like having them streamed to the public as well, so I think that's fair.
Okay, so, as topics for the next meeting.
So
about-
tentatively, before we do that, so I just want to write this down. So tentatively, January 25th, 8 and 9 a.m.
Randy, can we wake you up on that?
Heard ya. I heard ya. I'm good with January 25th.
Okay, very good. Do you want this venue, or should I see if this room's available again, or should I go
It
look someplace
doesn't
else?
matter to me,
I mean,
this
it's,
is great, actually.
okay, it's convenient for me, so, okay. Well, then I will try, I'll see if this room has availability that morning. And I'll make arrangements otherwise. So we'd look at the administrative rules. I wouldn't mind reaching out to DNR and see if they have any more mapping updates.
Everything is, we need to get some sort of letter to DNR, you know, requesting that we be put up to date.
Do you want to draft something, Don? For the letter? All right. And I guess the other thing is like in terms of, or I don't know, I feel like this board could use like some sort of orientation materials, like I don't know. It's good to read the law and like, you know, the regulations and look over the management plan. But I don't know, I'd like some guidance from DNR in terms of like maybe some other information that we could educate ourselves and be good, like be, you know, thorough advisors to the corridor.
Are you suggesting, to talk about that at the next meeting?
Yeah, I guess so. So orientation materials is kind of what I'd like.
Do you have any motion for that, sir?
Sure, I make a motion that for the next agenda that we put, we were like a list of orientation materials for the board beyond the laws, regulation, and management plan.
All those in favor?
Aye. All right. I think that's pretty good for,
Listen.
Thank you.
I think we got enough here to talk about for the next meeting.
I think so. We have a date. That's good.
And I'll work on trying to draft something to send to DNR and, you know, we may need your assistance.
You can handwrite it. I'll type it for you.
Okay, well, listen, Paul and John, we sure appreciate you, you know, dropping in and inputting to our meeting. We appreciate it. And definitely appreciate the time that you're taking to do that for us. We hope that things will get on better relationship here, that we can work more together and know what's going on. Thank you for that. John, thanks for dropping in.
Oh, yeah, thank you for inviting me.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I appreciate the time and looking forward to continuing to engage. I guess going forward, you can keep me as a principal point of contact, at least for now, and we'll sort it out going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. This time, we'll entertain some public comment. We try to limit it to 5 minutes. We allow Steve to go over a little bit, a minute or so. So anyway, anybody that have any comments to make would be glad to hear this time.
Thank you, the only one to comment, but you know, a couple things, if you don't mind.
Try to keep it to the 5 minute thing.
One thing, just a little, point of order, you, in your quote bylaws, you do say that if someone misses 2 consecutive meetings, you would try to replace them. I would know, I like Willie Lance, good person, but he's missed 3 meetings, so I would encourage you to request a replacement from the commissioners. The letter of request for notification, Paul said he would be the primary contact, but Carrie Lotsky is listed as the state coordinator for the Scenic Wild Rivers program. Great to have her engagement. The Scenic Wild River Advisory Board, which is the chairman of 3 different agencies. Be great to include them. I would like, great if you could make a public statement so that we all know that you're requesting this. And then just a minor note, you said any active projects, but it'd be good to request any proposals that they see. Do that. I would encourage you to review, maybe as part of your review process, who can request an exception to the Scenic Wild River Act. I received a notice from the Secretary of DNR and the Attorney General last year that only the property owners in the corridor can request projects. I was denied a review of my project. The Property Owners Association and the Watershed Foundation are not property owners. USGS is not a property owner. They should not have been eligible to request a project, according to the Attorney General and the Secretary of DNR last year. Mapping, I know that Roy Musselwhite has produced an updated GIS map of the corridor without any public review, without any input from this group, and they use it for management. Perhaps you could have him brief you on that document. And then my final thing is landowners, you're asking for permits, whether people would know that there's in the corridor or not. Landowners do not know what their responsibility is related to the corridor. I do, because I've made my purpose to learn about it. I put in 2 small fences to stop ATV traffic on my property. Before I did that, I went to the manager, Roy Musselwhite, and asked, what are the requirements? Can I do this? And we discussed it. I was fully expecting to put in an application for exception and this body to review it. That did not happen. My neighbor put a road right through zone 1 with a large pavilion, barbecue pit, cleared all the land right to the water, and has frequent parties during the summer. No requirements. So I would say there is an education component to the management plan. You all, in partnership with Roy, manager, would do an education process. It'd be great if you could educate landowners on their responsibility. And glad to hear that the planning department would put forth anything that they see happens in the corridor to the board. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I think this is hopefully really helpful, particularly with Paul Pedito's commitment to you all to engage with you. And I really appreciate everything that you do here. So thank you.
Anybody else?
That was my own comment as well, was that active, it should also be proposed plan versus
Clarify from the planning and permits department, we don't require permits for structures less than 240 square feet. We don't require permits for fences, so there are things that we may not know about too. Certainly building permits, additions, we would see those. We would see subdivision requests, grading, Seth's office is going to see those too if there's earth being moved. So we would see those sort of things. We can certainly let you know about that, but we all don't know about everything that happens, and sometimes people just don't do things with permit. We may not know about it.
So maybe if somebody does things, the department request, are you in corridor or?
Well, we would look at that. I mean, that's something we try to pay attention to now. If we see something happen.
Listen. Thank everybody for attending, contributing. Appreciate it. Been try to update things and be more efficient. If I hear a motion for adjournment. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.